Hello, welcome, good afternoon, and welcome to the Science Behind Talent Management Forum. And it's nice to see that we are already at 103 participants. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. This is a discussion on how predictive talent analytics work and how do we put the right people in the right job using measurable, predictable, and scientific assessment. So we would like to acknowledge first and foremost the presence of everyone here. We are now accompanied by leaders across top multinational companies and government agencies in 5 countries, namely Japan, Singapore, the Philippines, of course, India, and Indonesia. So I'm glad that everyone is here. I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of our colleagues from Quintegral and Tranocate across the region. And last but not least, I'd like to also acknowledge the presence of our highly esteemed client, in particular, the Central Bank of the Philippines or Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, as one of their leaders later on will be sharing via testimonial how have they been using Chally as a predictive talent analytic assessment in the development of their leaders, and it's still how it is still successfully contributing to their journey in terms of people development. And of course, one of our very own senior consultants will also be sharing with us his own success story on how he has helped clients with Chally across the region. So as we are excited to start and move ahead, I'd like to first give you a few reminders. First of which, that we are recording this session not only for the clients who are not able to join us today, but you may also have a special request for the recording of this session, and we will gladly provide it to you. Just get in touch with us. So as you can see, we'd like to remind you to stay focused because this is going to be a very fast-paced, in-depth discussion on predictive talent analytics, and we want to be able to maximize our time together. And of course, ask questions. Feel free to use the chat box. If you would like to share your questions via video or live, I would like to encourage you to reserve it at the very end in the question and answer portion. Of course, if you can, turn off your gadgets that may reduce the usage of your bandwidth. Keep your microphones on mute, participate fully, and if you can, please go ahead and turn on your cameras. This is our agenda for the forum today. So we will have a very quick welcome and introduction, which I'm doing right now, and then we will proceed immediately to the presentation of the Chally Predictive Talent Analytics, after which we will have the testimonial spotlight with the 2 special guests that we have. And of course, we will reserve the rest of the afternoon we have together in terms of the question and answer portion and also the closing remarks. So this is our roadmap for today in the forum. Okay, so let us begin. I actually would like to share a quote with you as we unlock the science of talent management and how do we actually maximize it in terms of leadership and development. A lot of experts and people say that the best way to predict the future is to create it. So what we would like to focus on for this forum is how do we actually address the pain points and challenges of talent management in terms of 5 important aspects of talent management. And the following pain points are, how do we actually reduce unwanted turnover? How do we avoid losing our top talent? How do we put the right people in the right jobs so that they don't get burnt out and actually they are exerting minimum effort and energy so that they can actually be more productive and the organization itself can conserve its energy in taking care of its people? How do we actually match the right people do the right job in doing that, and how do we actually put the right people in the right intervention? And last but not least, how do we address a weak succession planning initiative and actually strengthen it as well? So these are some of the pain points that actually talent analytics can provide. And we're talking about science here because it's a very objective and scientific measure of making talent management decisions. So the ultimate question for me, which I would like to ask you to keep in your minds as we go through this very quick presentation, is how do we actually combine objective and scientific measure with subjective measure so that we can actually manage talent effectively? because the duality of the objective measure and the subjective measure and combining it in terms of how we make decisions in managing our talent is actually the sweet spot. So this is a quick overview. We will be featuring actually one very powerful tool on predictive talent analytics called Chally. And of course, it was founded in the 1970s. I'm sure there are a few Gen X people who are part of the audience, and this is definitely during that timeline. And it was developed by the founders specifically first for the US Justice Department. How would they actually create a non-discriminatory and predictive tool to make sure that they actually issue weapons to the appropriate law enforcers? So that's how this all started in those times. And of course, through a trial and error, they realized after probably 3 rounds of experimenting, they figured out that the way that insurance companies actually use actuarial science was a very powerful way of measuring future performance of leaders in terms of their potential or natural tendency to succeed across all competencies that I will actually be discussing later on. And as of today, Chally actually operates through us, and we are one of their partners and operates in 49 countries, serving 2,500 customers, and is available in over 23 languages. And of course, Chally is a scientific-based research company and not a consulting firm, and we are the consulting firm. I'm not sure if I introduced myself earlier. If for people who are actually attending the first forum, were not able to attend the first forum series, I'm Christine Santayana, by the way, from Quintegral, and I actually run the office in the Philippines. I'm also the sales director of APAC and also a Chally certified talent analyst. So pushing ahead, the ultimate question is why choose Chally? And we have 5 strengths that we would like to share today. First and foremost, our technology. Our technology actually uses actuarial science, or the law of large numbers, in predicting future performance for leaders across 140 competencies. Probably 80% of those belong to leadership and management, and the rest belong to sales. And Chally actually has a very high resolution way, an accurate and very precise way of measuring the many critically diverse elements that define human talent, whether it's individual or by a group. And the beauty of this is that it's the reliability of this tool. You only need to take this tool once, as long as you're around 18 to 21 years old. And the assertion is that at around that age, our talent, skills, or our natural tendency to succeed across these competencies have already been developed as a result of your environment, of how you were brought up by your family, probably the way you are being taught in your schools, and what experiences were you exposed to. So the assertion is that our natural tendency to succeed across these competencies are established along that age or timeline. And even a life-changing event, and as you gather your experience in your professional career, it doesn't actually significantly change anymore your natural tendency. And that's quite interesting to take a look at later on as we go deeper into the presentation. Of course, Chally also used total quality talent management approach, which basically says that it uses the law of large numbers and actuarial science and focuses on the sourcing out or eliminating the sources of errors, and actually focusing on the strengths of the leaders rather than the weaknesses. And of course, making a balanced assessment of both. And of course, it's more than a personality test, which means it's very hard to manipulate when you answer this particular talent analytic tool. It's an online survey of around 288 questions. And these are non-face value questions, meaning these are questions that actually have nothing to do with leadership. And what happens is that when you answer it, your set of responses are being compared to a database. And the way you responded is actually compared to the other people who answered it in the database, and patterns or overlapping of patterns are actually considered in terms of if you are successful in this skill. People who are usually successful in that skills tend to answer in a certain direction, as opposed to low performers who tend to answer in the other direction. Okay, so I'd like to showcase at this point just a partial list of our regional clients that have availed and have used Chally as a solution in terms of managing their talent, whether in combination with the leadership development program or part of the career development of top executives. As you can see, we cut across industries, and also this covers most of the APAC region. In fact, later on, our consultant, his name is Kelvin, he'll be able to share one experience in a regional client. So I'd like to focus very quickly now to the Chally's triple fit framework. This is very important to understand because across assessments, when we are looking at the natural tendency of a leader to succeed in terms of all of these competencies that Chally can measure, it's very important to take a look at how these three important aspects of a leader fit all together in terms of their strength, in terms of their style, and in terms of their skill. So let's take a look at the first component, which is strength. And these strengths actually focus on the natural aptitude or ability of a leader to be able to demonstrate or execute a particular skill as based on their capability of that particular talent skill. So this means that at around 18 to 21 years old, across all of these competencies, we have already developed a natural strength in terms of demonstrating most of these skills. And when we talk about natural strength, it actually means that you actually require a minimum amount of energy to be able to execute or demonstrate that skill. That's what it means. And actually, when you see a potential score that's actually not that high, because you will see some numbers later on, it actually doesn't mean that you won't succeed in that skill. It actually simply means that you need to exert more effort to be able to, or exert more energy to be able to demonstrate that particular skill. So that's why it's important that when we are developing our leaders or when we are deciding if this leader is ready now to move to a higher role or to a different function, we need to take a look at overall across the critical success skills that are required for that position. Is this a leader predisposed to be naturally demonstrating the skills or not? And we need to be able to balance that. Otherwise, this leader will be exerting a lot of energy. It doesn't mean that they won't be successful, but it actually means that they will require more effort, more time, more energy. And if the organization in itself now needs to support that particular leader, and what we want to avoid is for our top leaders or critical leaders to be burnt out. So it's very crucial that you consider this particular aspect in terms of in the making of any talent management decision. So that's what strengths is all about. It's a natural tendency or aptitude or ability of a leader to demonstrate or exert that skill. When we talk about style, it actually focuses on personal preferences and motivation. What are my sources of motivation and demotivation? And actually, it's qualified into three different areas. We can take a look at the motivation towards tasks and responsibilities. The second one is motivation towards relationships, or how I interact with the people that I work closely with and the various stakeholders in the organization. And the third one is how am I motivated by influencing or by power? So these are your personal preferences and motivations as a leader. It's very important also to take a look at this as an important piece of the entire puzzle because it's very powerful. Because motivation is actually very intangible amongst all of these three things that we are looking at. In fact, for ourselves, it changes from time to time depending on the situation and depending on the task that I'm about to do. So as we take a look at a person's viability for a particular role and will they be able to succeed with it successfully, motivation is actually a very important aspect as well. Last but not least, in the triple fit framework is the skill level and the demonstrated mastery of critical behaviors. And here, we need to take a look at how does this person actually demonstrate these critical behaviors which are important for this person's role. And one way of doing that is through survey feedbacks. And also Chally has one of these reports that actually generate that is also based on the 180 or the 360-degree survey, which could be anchored on the critical behaviors that are important for that particular person to succeed in that role. Even in a role that this person hasn't occupied yet, we can actually put those pieces of the puzzle together. Now, what you can see here is the Chally's productive analytic metrics. And what is important to see is that It actually has a lot of benefits for selection or screening or for recruitment, for alignment. It could also be used for engagement, for career development, for succession planning, for objective feedback, and of course, for leadership development as well. So what happens here is that you just need to take this particular assessment once, and it actually creates a core assessment of 866 data points. And you can imagine that this will be the leader's performance DNA. And from there, we can actually extract and customize a lot of reports by which we can take a look at this person's viability or future performance or natural tendency to succeed across 60 positions, and could be customized also for what you specifically need if it's not available in the 60 position profiles that Chally has already generated. And the beauty of this is that you can also make it in terms of a group of talent or a group of leaders. Instead of just having one performance DNA, you now have a talent dashboard that you'd be able to take a look at and maximize as you make talent management decisions in any phase of the organization, in terms of its expansion, in terms of its improvement, in terms of its how do they promote their leaders, or how they actually hire people. Another important aspect of this particular tool is that the database, or the entire universe by which you are measured once you answer this assessment, is across 700, almost 700,000 employees or managers, sales and specialists, and corporate customers across the world. We're looking at this particular size of people that are gainfully employed individuals, which means there are a good mix of low performers, mid performers, and high performers across all of these competencies. And of course, Chally is also backed up by 35 years of continuous research, which is around 400 actuarial studies. And like I said earlier, this particular predictive talent analytic tool can actually measure 140 work skills across 61 typical positions, and the results are pretty much stable. And last but not least, I think this is very important to share as well. The tool is actually Six Sigma Level 5, which is pretty high in terms of the total quality talent management approach. It's actually synonymous or equivalent to a world-class manufacturing practice, as Six Sigma Level 6 is airplane safety. So imagine the accuracy rate of this particular tool, and it's pretty high. And I would say I would declare now here, as my slide says, 85% accurate. It's pretty high across our worthy competitors. And of course, just like any tool, it's not a completely 100% effective tool, but this is quite high already at 85%. And some of its benefits also is that according to research and the information gathered by Chally, that if talent management decisions are done in the organization for the next 3 years, and 30% of their decision is based on an objective measure, which is, of course, the predictive talent analytics assessment is one of them. There's actually a 34% reduction in turnover, which is actually quite good. Of course, also an increase in productivity by 30%, given that you use the information that we get from predictive talent analytic tools for the next 3 years. And of course, last but not least, the 3-year ROI is pretty much high at 1,400% and really quite effective. Allow me to move to my next slide. All right, I'd like to share here at this point a practical example of how predictive talent analytics can actually impact sales. Chally actually in the US focus primarily on sales. And here in our region, we also focus on leadership and management. And this is a very powerful example that will qualify how important it is to use objective measures, scientific measures, in terms of developing or choosing the right people for a specific role. And in this example, we are zooming into sales. So for example, if we're looking at applying productivity analytics in sales, what you see here in the slide is a traditional approach to sales benchmarking. So as you can see, in the entire spread of the sales force, you have the bottom 20% of salespeople, you have the middle 60%, and you have the top 20% of salespeople. And of course, you can see here the revenue that they generate. For the bottom 20, around 6 million altogether. For the middle 60%, around 34. And of course, the top 20% of salespeople, around 160 million, which actually totals for 200 million of total sales for this example. So what would consultants today say? How do we actually create sales benchmarking? Study the techniques of the top 20% and train the middle 60%. Pretty straightforward, right? And usually that's what we have been doing all along without the help yet of productivity analytics. So what happens if you do that? Actually, there is a result that there's an improvement in their performance, of course. The middle 60% improves by a typical 5%, and each salesperson, of course, produces a 2.25% overall improvement in sales. So originally, if we had 200 million as total sales, we will have here 4.5 million additional on top of the 200 million, which is actually pretty good. But now we would like to present another point of view. If we use productivity analytics in terms of the selection of the right salespeople, what are we going to take a look at? Here, it's pretty radical because what the productivity analytics will say is that we need to choose the right salespeople and replace the bottom 20% with at least average salespeople. So what happens is that we actually skew the sales instead of just primarily by a 5 to 10, originally at 2.25%, it actually becomes a 5 to 10% gain. Because what happens here is that if the bottom 20 joins and we actually choose them, choose average salespeople instead, and of course still train the middle 60% on what the top 20% is doing, it actually skews it to the right, all the way to the right. So overall, instead of just 204.5 million increase in sales, we actually have 223.7, which is pretty good. And it actually makes sense. This is where we actually say that when we put the right people in the right job, we actually make an overall effectiveness in terms of productivity, and in this example, in terms of revenue, because we're looking at salespeople. So how can you use Chally in terms of as a predictive talent analytic tool in terms of career pathing and succession planning? First of all, you can use it for assessment of potential and compare it also, which actually comprises the strength and the skill and the style part in terms of motivation, if you remember the triple fit framework. And of course, you can actually use it also for the assessment of present capability. And this is quite important, especially in the context of engagement and leadership and development, because if you know where the potential of the person is in terms of one skill or for across those skills for that particular role, and you actually know where the person's present capability is, because it doesn't mean if a person a person doesn't demonstrate 100% potential at any given time. So if I have an example here, I'm going to use my glass of water. So if this is my capability, my potential for a particular skill, and this is how the predictive talent analytic measures my natural tendency to succeed for this skill, it actually doesn't mean that that is where my current ability here is also. So for example, if my water is only up to here, this is where my present capability is. So as you can see, if this is the potential of the person, and if this is where the present capability is, you now see the gap, and you will be able to see where the area of improvement is and how you can actually optimize and anchor the interventions that you will use for that leader so that the person can actually execute at full potential. And of course, Chally can also be used for assessing of turnover causes, and also could be used as a baseline for coaching. How could it be used? Chally-based coaching is quite interesting, and our guest later on from Central Bank of the Philippines will share his own experience as a participant and as part of the prime mover of the intervention that they're running, of how powerful actually Chally could be for Chally-based coaching. And last but not least, identification of critical competencies by position. So I'd like to show this diagram very quickly, just to establish why is it important to build actuarially predictive skill measure. As you can see here, the relevance of a scientific measure is way much larger, of course, than personality measures, though of course, Chally in effect also does have personality measures. And Chally assessment, because of its scientific measure, is actually more relevant and could actually be 30% of your decision in terms of either hiring a leader or promoting a leader. And I'd like to establish here that the science behind talent management is not the end all and be all in terms of a decision, whether you're going to move a leader to a new role or you're going to promote them. What we actually recommend as we work with clients across the region is what we call the 30-30-30-10 rule, which actually compromises 100%. The first 30% is what does the scientific or objective measure say? So what does the predictive talent analytic results say in terms of the leader's natural tendency to succeed across the skills that are important for him to succeed in that role. So what are his strengths or what are her strengths? So let's take a look at that. And that's 1/3 of the decision. The second third of the decision is if a person has already been in the organization and you'd like to move them to a different role, an important aspect of the decision, which is the second third, is how is the person in terms of the performance evaluation or the performance for the last 2 to 3 years. How is the person performing in the current role? And the third 30% of the decision would be what do the people around this particular person, the stakeholders that he or she interacts with, say about this person in terms of the execution of those particular skills. So having a look at all of those important elements, that leaves us also with the last 10%, which completes the entire picture of how you will make a decision, whether you will move a person, hire a person, or promote a leader, is that 10% actually belongs to culture fit. And when we talk about culture fit, it's not only zooming out to the culture of the organization, but also the culture of that particular role. And it's quite interesting to know that even for a role, there's a particular cultural mindset that goes along with it, and if the person is a good fit for it or not. At this point, I'd like to share very quickly a sample report. And at this point, we would like to showcase one of our top seller reports, which is the best match. And what it actually does, it actually tells us the future performance of a leader across 5 manager types. And there are actually 5 general manager types that we can have across all of the positions that are available in an organization. We have the line production manager, the staff project manager. We also have the profit center manager, individual contributor, and last but not least, a sales force manager. Of course, the line production manager is basically almost like a CEO, that somebody who actually looks after an organization that's very huge and has the bottom line responsibility of the profitability of the organization. And of course, a staff project manager is any function that provides an expertise for the line manager to make a decision, whether this particular role is from HR, from finance, from marketing, from IT, or customer service, or whatever function that actually provides a certain specialized area of expertise to support the line manager's decision is actually a staff project manager. And of course, we have the profit center manager, which is a mini CEO or a mini line production manager in a smaller business unit. A profit center manager succeeds in that particular for handling or taking responsibility for the profitability of that particular business unit. And of course, we have the individual contributor, which is self-explanatory. And last but not least, we have the sales force manager. So in this report, what you can see here is that you will even see if the particular leader indicated whether they were somewhat willing or unwilling to acknowledge personal limitations. And that particular feature of Chally is anchored on the ability of a person to naturally admit their limitations or not. And actually, Chally can read that. So for this sample report, as you can see here, it will describe the candidate's candor in responding to questions. So in our example, the leader was actually somewhat unwilling to acknowledge personal limitations. However, Chally was able to see that and, of course, approximate the actual work approach and motivation needs. And for some organization, that's really important to be able to understand if the person's candor in terms of admitting their limitations, because some people underestimate their own strengths, which is actually the opposite of what you're seeing. And some people are just right and candid in terms of admitting, saying what it really is. And of course, there are other people who are somewhat hesitant to say that. And usually these are people who are always very focused on the first impression and hardly admits that they need help. And sometimes that's really important because that causes burnout, right? They keep on saying yes, that they can do this, but actually they just can't say to us that they're not capable or they need help. And that's quite difficult in the aspect of managing that particular leader. So as you can see here, I'm zooming into the 5 manager types that can be measured by this report. And as you can see, you can see some scores here from 66, 59, 56, 55, and 46. I think it's important to highlight here that these potential scores Actually, simply, this is the law of large numbers. So you will never see a 0. You will never see 100. You'll only see from 1 to 99. And actually, because it's being compared in terms of actuarial science and the law of large numbers of taking a look at your response versus what other people are saying in terms of the database, and if you are successful, people who are successful in that skill tend to answer in one direction, as opposed to people who are low performers in that skill tend to answer in a different direction. So what we're looking at here is a potential score of 50 and above. As long as you're 50 and above, that actually already signifies that the person has a natural tendency to succeed. If it's lower than 50, what we're taking a look at here is 40 to 49, because that's actually a coachable, or there are workarounds that could be developed, further supported for that leader to succeed. And of course, if it's lower than 30, it actually simply means that this person really needs to exert so much energy and effort and create workarounds over the person's experience and career to be able to succeed and demonstrate that skill. But it actually doesn't mean that that person cannot be successful. And that's important to notify, to be clear about. So as you can see here, we are zooming in also to the particular critical success skills that are important for Salesforce manager, because for this sample report, the highest score, or the best match for this leader is actually a Salesforce manager at 66. And as you can see, he will also be successful as a profit center manager at 59, and of course staff project manager at 56, individual contributor at 55, and line production manager at 46. 46 is actually not so far away. I would actually say that this person is still coachable for that particular role. And what you will see here in terms of the scores now is actually an aggregate average of the critical success skills for that particular position. So for example, for Salesforce manager, you see here 7 skills. Teaching in a structured setting all the way till focused on quantitative results. And as you can see, the scores that this person actually, potential scores for each of the skills, they were averaged, and the statistical way of doing that was getting the aggregate average, meaning not to be able to hide, to be able to make sure that we don't hide the low scores. Any score that's higher than 80 was dropped down to 80 first before taken in as an average. So for example, we have here profit conscious in a management role at 89 was dropped to 80. And of course, focus on quantitative results from 92, it was dropped to 80. And of course, we also have another one, right? I think make formal presentations at 84 was dropped to 80 before adding all of the 7 and dividing it by 7. Therefore, the score that was generated for Salesforce manager was at 66. And that's an important statistical way of measuring it, so it doesn't actually hide the low scores. So as you can see here, this particular report showcases that the leader has a natural tendency to succeed across 4 positions: Salesforce manager, profit center manager, staff project manager, individual contributor, and of course at 46 as a line production manager. With the proper support, this person can actually also be successful. And what it showcases next is that it highlights here in a very linear scale the score of that particular potential score of the person in that particular skill, and also a definition of the skill. And very quickly, if you browse through what's being written, what is written here on the slide, you can see how very detailed and how granular Chally defines each competency or each skill. And if the skill, of course, here I'm actually describing what you're seeing right now. And of course, at 66, the report can also say at 66, what is the skill capability of the leader? So as you can see here, for the most part, you prepare training presentations, you stay on top of new information, and so forth and so on. If the score ends up being lower than 30, like as what you can see here in the example, taking initiative in a business unit, after the skill capability level, you will even see a coaching suggestion, which is sometimes, and most of the time, also very helpful for the development of the leader. And then last but not least, an important part of this report is the motivational characteristics. And it is really described in detail. And of course, these are the sources of motivation and demotivation of the leader. And of course, you will have some tips here in understanding what's the best way to support that leader in terms of the motivational characteristic that was described. There you go. on how to focus and motivate the leader. So what you saw was just one of the career development reports that are available from Chally, which is called the Best Match Report. So it compares an individual's result with several roles and identifies the best match. It could definitely assist in employee redeployment and gives tips for how to manage that particular leader or manager. We also have the PAR report, which is focusing on the style piece of the triple fit framework, which measures motivation and relevant work habits. And of course, we also have the predictive strength indicator, which is very important. It's not specific to any position, but identifies an individual's top 10 skill strengths and how it could be derived from the common sales or management skills. And this is usually a very good news report. It feels good to be able to see this, what your top strengths are, and also helps identify opportunities of where the leader can contribute. And last but not least, just to manage our time, I will actually show a video, a very quick video on how the talent audit will work. It's actually now zooming out from an individual to a group of people. And how do you actually create a talent dashboard so that you can manage your key talent in terms of not only their critical success skills in their current role, but you can actually place a few more roles, as you can see here in my next slide. But I think before I show my slide, I'm ready to show the video very quickly. So everybody's still okay? Oh, the video's no longer there. Maybe we'll try to play it later as I push ahead of this presentation. This is actually what the talent audit looks like. So what you have here is an example of 20 leaders across 5 positions. You have account manager, new business development, line production manager, line project manager, and profit center manager. And as you can see, it uses the green, yellow, and red color code, which signifies the same way that we follow a traffic light. So green means go, yellow means wait. But for this particular talent audit tool, what we mean by yellow here is that this particular leader could be recommended in terms of objective measure, but needs to work on a few things, at least 3 particular skills that they need support on in terms of intervention. And of course, you have the red, which means that they may not be viable in terms of their natural tendency, and they might require a lot of effort to be able to be successful in that particular role. And it's in an Excel sheet, and once you click on that position, it actually opens up to the critical success skills that are required. So for example, for this line production manager, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 skills. And again, it's color coded in such a way that you know that, for example, for Baker, he's actually recommended, but we need to take a look at a few things, which is his production approach, because it's in pink, his written communication, it's in light yellow, and of course, inspires accountability and teamwork. So in other words, for this particular role, in terms of the 30% decision of making whether this person is fit for this role or not, we already know that they have 2 individuals who are ready to go. And of course, 1 person who needs a little bit of support. And these people actually might require a lot of energy and exert a lot of effort to be able to be successful in that role. Okay. I think at this point, and I have received information that our first guest is about to share his own experience of how has Chally, or the predictive talent analytic tool, contributed to his own development as a leader, and probably the leaders also that he is serving in his organization. And he's already entered the meeting, and I think he's already here. So I'm going to go ahead, Sir John, and introduce you. So far, so good, everyone. Actually, I'd like to see if you are still ready to go. Oh, your camera's on already, Sir John. Hi, sir. Everybody's still good? Did I get a thumbs up sign from everyone? If you are still ready to go. Oh, thank you very much for doing that. All right, here we go. So before I turn you over to Sir John, he will share his own success story and of how he has benefited himself from Chally and the people that he works with. I would like to present to you Sir John Raymond Almada. He's the head of the Capacity Development Team on Leadership Programs and Executive Offices at the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. For our colleagues who are from other countries, it actually stands for the Central Bank of the Philippines. And he has been working there and contributing in terms of human resource management and human development for over 13 years, if I'm not mistaken. And of course, he has been cited as one of the outstanding and model employees in the year 2019. And as a certified talent economist, he has been a resource person and a researcher on people development and management for Southeast Asian central banks. And I think also in particular, the Asian Development Bank. And he is also a professor for the De La Salle Philippines and has gotten his postgraduate degree in organizational behavior with merit from London School of Economics. I think it would be insightful also to cite that he is very talented. He's also a singer, a dancer, an actor, and a host. I'm being surrounded by very talented people today. And John believes that despite his many achievements, he can always grab every opportunity to learn to become a better leader. I like that mindset, sir. And his Chally-based coaching has helped him become mindful of such a promising destination. So I present to you, ladies and gentlemen, Sir John Almada.
Hello,
Please give him a virtual round of applause if you can. Thank you, sir.
Virtual round of applause. Hi, thank you. Can you hear me, Christine?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, all right. Thank you. And good day to... Oh, wow. Thank you very much for that introduction. And I'd like to greet a good day to the rest of the participants who are coming from the different time zones. I'm not really pretty sure about your time zone, but a very good day to you. And I'd like to thank Christine for this opportunity as well to share on my experience regarding Chally and how it impacted positively my leadership journey in the Central Bank of the Philippines. Now, as a matter of a backgrounder, Chally is an instrument, is an assessment tool that was used or has still been used in the Central Bank of the Philippines when we are trying to develop the managerial and leadership competencies of our managers and leaders. So it's within a grand program that is called the Management Development Program, wherein you take the test so that it's diagnostics first as a good approach. And then right after that, you will be undertaking certain blended learning programs. It could be via lecture series. It could be, of course, a workshop, get to know with the rest of the participants. There are also games and activities that are present. And there are brainstorming sessions as well. But what I really like about the program is that it has a coaching element to it, wherein the Chally results are drilled down. And what's also important is that, of course, the external coach, by the way, will not have to stay there for a long, long time. And this is the very reason that the supervisor, my supervisor in particular, would have to be in support all throughout the way in terms of exposing me to certain duties and responsibilities that could probably also address my learning and development interventions. So as I've described earlier, we are using the Chally based on or under the umbrella of the development program for managers and leaders here in the bank, and including the supervisors, by the way. But most of them are identified by our organization development department as potential successors for critical and key positions. Now, the very positive impact on my performance with Chally is that, I think Christine also mentioned that earlier, is my mantra that even if, regardless of your achievements in life, you still have to be humble about the feedback coming from other people and grab that every opportunity in order for you to become a better leader. Now, I saw that in Chally. You know what, at first, there is always like a negation part to it, because you might feel that, hey, I think I'm really good at this particular competency on decision-making or in terms of developing people. And those are the two competencies which were highlighted in my Chally assessment or result. Now, of course, initially you would have some cognitive dissonance or in denial stage that probably, this might not really be true. But if you take a look at the details, this is what really is good about Chally, is that the descriptors there are on point. And because these are also coming from a global lexicon, probably because we're coming from the very fact that it's been validated many times across industries, across various occupational groupings and across job levels as well. And that is very important to take note, because your job might not you are thinking that it could probably be unique, and that is okay. But the thing here is there is also a prototype somewhere in the global landscape, and that's very important to take note. Behavioral indicators that have been considered in Chally coming from an international perspective can also be applied within. But Chally is also very keen in terms of considering the contextual circumstance of an individual. And this is why feedback from the supervisor, feedback from peers, feedback from staff are very, very important, aside from your self-report. And this is quite addressing also psychologically what we are pointing at or pointing out as like a Johari's window in terms of knowing yourself better. Sometimes we're just full of how we know ourselves and become stubborn about it. Sometimes we're also saying that, you know, I may not necessarily care about how other people think about me, but truly it is very important. And our identity has to take a look at those quadrants. And the very important quadrant for me in particular would be the blind spot, because it tells a lot about how, or the aspects that I know about myself, but other people know, other people describe me as. And it's very important that my staff, my supervisor, and my peer are looking at me in a different angle. And that speaks a lot about the humility and the openness to development. That is, you know, also the common philosophy as well, or established philosophy in Chally. It also informed me a lot of what I really need to address. And as mentioned earlier, it was really developing people in decision-making. Overall, it has taught me how to become more mindful about my learning experience, about my areas for development, and so that all of the approach under the development program was really targeted for me. So whenever the lectures were ongoing before, and the brainstorming sessions with my classmates, or even the games, and even the reporting portion, and even the breakout groups, and even up to the coaching sessions and to the learning contracting with my supervisor, I kept that in mind, my areas for development, decision-making, and developing people. I was having a little bit of a unique experience, because the decision-making part was a little bit confusing, and it's because I was coming from becoming a chief of staff before, and I joined this right now, the department, which is called the Capacity Development Department, which probably a lot of you might know. It used to be the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas Institute, if you've come across central banking colleagues. But right after the moment that I joined CDD, or the Capacity Development Department, I wasn't giving yet people. So the decision-making was really very limited. And that was the time when I took the test. And so my mood during that time was, do I really need to decide on many things, or do I just probably defer to my immediate supervisor and receive instructions? So there was a little bit of hesitation. And it also appeared in Chally. Remember when Christine was, in fact, trying to describe your hesitation, your uncertainty, or your predicament in terms of taking the tests, or even how you interpret the results. And because it also has a room for you to completely negate the result. I mean, this is an effective tool. Okay, do not get me wrong, but this is an effective tool. But what I am saying here is that ultimately, you know your gap, you know where you need to improve on, and you also need to ask your supervisor. These are tools, and there are questions, setup questions. I am grateful for Chally because the indicators have also been mapped against our indicators specific to the central bank employees, because we've done our BEIs, or the behavioral events, interviews, expert panel validation, and task analysis. And we've figured certain critical incidents as well that might entail certain degrees of competence, which have been the main consideration or basis as well of the Chally instrument. That's why we're grateful that it has been mapped. And so going back to my example earlier about decision-making, the coaching session really helped me a lot, because it contextualized what did it mean by I had a certain gap in terms of decision-making, because the other competencies had also a relatively high result, like the executive intelligence and the other competencies, or specifically strategic management as well. But in terms of decision-making, there was a little bit of a falling short of the expected level, and the coach had to contextualize that. The coach had to drill down certain scenarios about how I am working, how is my routine, and who am I reporting to? And those are the things that have been considered in the coaching session. And In fact, the coach provided me feedback that I really need to strike a balance between becoming facilitative and doing smart and agile decisions, because I was coming from the fact that, hey, do I need to make a decision in the right position to do that decision or not? So there was a little bit of a pressure to strike a balance between the two. And the coach told me that based on the Chally results as well. It also taught me on the need or the benefit for in terms of recognizing the authority's limitations, so that I know too the limitations of my decisions, and that I need to balance my passion on certain ideal things, especially, after my postgraduate and my empowerment experience. I felt I could decide on many, many things, but you have to consider all these layers, especially in bureaucratic setups. And it also taught me on how to present better, on the table, especially during presentations or in meetings with top management, trying to know their personalities as well. And these are the tips that I saw in Chally, that I need to be very much aware about the personalities that I'm coming across, the communication skills that I also need to enhance, that I need to also develop. And so that I had to know how to speak the language as well. It's not necessarily about, do you speak English or do you speak Filipino, but it also should be about, the volume, the pacing, the nonverbals, the humors, and everything cultural. On the second managerial leadership competency that I needed to address based on Chally was in particular decision making. The coaching really helped me a lot because, the developing people, based on the coaching session, the developing people was coming from my hesitation to provide learning and development interventions because I was not empowered during that time. But as a moving forward activity that was given to me lately, and currently, that's why I'm team heading already, is my opportunity as well to develop other people. And I've learned, coming from the Chally instrument, that in trying to develop people, it's not just about providing them training interventions, because a human being is more than that. And interventions could be just more than training. It could be, subjecting your staff into a buddy system, ensuring that there is a coaching and mentoring that is in practice, or probably just telling the person, hey, probably you could also do some self-study and you'll do it very well. And this is why I'm already practicing that. I've been facilitating certain personality tests as well, or learning style survey as well to my staff. But I have yet, of course, to discuss with them, especially during this quarter, in order for us to really thresh out the specifics in terms of their performance for the first quarter of the year. And overall, it really just provides me that mantra to become very, very mindful about what I still need to do in order to become a better manager and leader so far. Thank you, Christine. I hope I did not go over time.
No, you didn't. That was very excellent. I think it was a very illuminating and enlightening sharing that you just did. It was more like a conversation, actually. And I really appreciate how you deep dived into what you wanted to work on in that particular intervention as a result of taking a look at the results of Chally as one of the components, right? Because you also did the survey feedback. And I actually want to resonate with what you said, that, the results of Chally is really powerful and very high in resolution, that it's not something that you can digest in one sitting, right? It's a work in progress. It's a journey more than a destination. And that's why I like how you have highlighted what you wanted to work on in terms of the competencies that were recommended for you to develop further as a leader in your organization, and how Chally has helped you. But of course, it's not something that you can accept in one sitting as well. And that's why it's very important to understand that it could be a blind spot, that it's something that you can ask people that you trust and your boss, just like what you said, and something that you just have to discover as you go along, right? Right, John? Thank you very much for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
I appreciate
You're welcome.
it. And I'll see you in the next program, of course. And thank you very much, Sir John. Round of applause for Sir. And of course, if you have any questions for John, you can reserve it later in the question and answer portion. I'd like to give a quick opportunity for my other colleague now, moving on very quickly to Kelvin Celis. And he is one of our top senior consultants in terms of not only being a talent analyst for Chally, but also an AMA senior facilitator. He's also an executive coach. And I just wanted to cite to John that actually, I'm glad you said you also shared your success story for coaching, because there are some executive coaches who are also joining us today. And hopefully your coach is here also in the forum and heard your share as well. So Kelvin is also an integral coach, as you can see here, a transition coach and a Tiagi interactive game strategist. He actually uses all of this to support his clients. And he has worked with multiple organizations across the region. And also, he has also served as a former head of HR operations for a huge telecom business here in Metro Manila, and managed its 500 strong employees in terms of HR needs. He had an opportunity to work in several locations with clients across the region. And I think it's going to cite one or two stories about that and how the Chally solution has actually helped his client. All right, so
Great.
round of applause for Kelvin, and take it away,
Thank you.
Kelvin.
Thank you, Christine. Okay, good day, ladies and gentlemen. So my name is Kelvin Celis. I have been an executive coach and a trainer and a facilitator for more than 13 years. And I have been using Chally for almost 10 years in my executive coaching endeavors. And what I want to share with you, a perspective of Chally in the terms of being a coach. As a certified Chally talent analyst, what I want everyone to probably understand is that as a coach, when I started coaching someone in Singapore, I was flown to Singapore to coach this specific executive for a huge logistics company. The Chally gave me an opportunity to really deep dive on the specific needs of that specific individual. And what it helped for me as a coach is that because the Chally results are so clear and very, I can really say it's really unbiased. It doesn't defer to any culture. It gave my coachee a chance to really look at how he is as a leader. And for me, as a talent analyst, I was able to interpret his course in such a way that it would give him an opportunity to really track his progress and be able to look at where his potential can be in the organization. This leader was up for promotion. And as we all know, that if you have a promotion coming in, you know that there are specific competencies needed for that level. And what the Chally has given him is to really look at his own specific strengths and also his specific gaps. As a coach, because I have that tool in my hand and he has his tool as well, reading it, he was able to really identify what needs and what journey he has to go through for him to succeed. And for me as a coach, I didn't have to have much effort to really let him discover his own weaknesses. Through that specific tool, what actually happened is that it immediately opened his mind, and I was able to work with him more fluidly, more harmony probably with this specific individual. So that's the result of having a Chally as a specific tool in your coaching needs. The second question that I want to share with everyone is that my experience as a program designer. What I like about what Sir John has shared a while ago is that if we use Chally as a tool for our leadership programs, what happens is that it really gives us a chance to focus on specific competencies for a group of people or for specific people in the organization to succeed. Now, as you create the program itself, of course, you create the program with the specific competencies in mind. Once the individuals have done the Chally and you receive their results, once you see it, then definitely as a program designer and even the facilitator for that program, you will have a more spearhead attack on that specific design. And what I really appreciated is that this is the design of the program becomes more successful than it should be because of the competencies that equip you on what specific parts and areas you need to focus on for that specific group. So it really becomes tailored for your organization and also for a specific person that needs this development. And I think that is the two stories that I can share with everyone. And I hope you have a better understanding of what Chally can do to you and also contribute to your organization. So thank you very much, Christine.
Thank you, Kelvin, for that quick share on those two stories on how Chally has supported your client. At this point, first of all, we've gone over time already, so I'd like to apologize that we have gone over time. I think the conversations about Chally has been very rich. And at this point, if you need to leave, it's okay, but we'd like to spend a few more minutes to accommodate a few questions if you have any questions at this point for any of us with regard to what you have heard so far. And you can actually use the chat box as well. And we'd like to open the floor now for some questions that we would accommodate at this point. So actually, I saw a question here on how different this particular tool is from other existing assessments. I guess instead of just zooming in into that particular tool that you cited in a direct message, and we can actually provide you with a comparative analysis via email, since we have your name here and you have registered for the forum, we'll get that to you. But what I wanted to highlight in terms of the competitive advantage of the Chally Predictive Talent Analytic tool, I guess, are two important things: the technology that's being used and its reliability, which means that most assessments actually are as predictive and as accurate, but it's usually for a certain duration of time, like a few years. You need to be able to take it again. For Chally Predictive Talent Analytics, because it measures your natural tendencies to succeed and your talent scale that was developed at around 18 to 21 years old, it's actually pretty much reliable, and you don't need to be able to take it again, because not even a life-changing event can actually alter the way your propensity or your natural tendency to succeed in a particular skill is not significantly changed. Now, how can you actually use potential in terms of how you operate as a leader? It's very important to take a look at your natural tendency to succeed so that you can actually leverage on your strength to be able to create workarounds for the ones that you need to further develop on. Because it actually doesn't mean that for the skills that you feel that you require a lot of energy or effort to demonstrate, that you will never be successful at that. In fact, some people have has demonstrated that they are actually quite successful in doing that. But actually, it requires a lot of energy, and sometimes it causes burnout, which is why one of the pain points of talent management, which is losing our top talent and reducing unwanted turnover, is primarily because of this particular reason. People are in a role that actually predominantly for most of the critical success skills that are required for a person to succeed in that role, actually they just need so much energy, or they have not developed appropriate workarounds. So one way of using predictive talent analytics, not only as a standalone intervention, but could be supported by coaching, could be supported by a leadership and management intervention, is how do the leader actually leverage the existing natural strengths or tendency to demonstrate it easily, so that they can actually create coping mechanisms and workarounds to be able to demonstrate easier the ones that are not so natural to them. So maybe, there are some questions coming in. That's good. So we're going to give them some time to get some feedback, not only from myself, but also from Kelvin. Does this assessment give an insight into beliefs, values, and assumptions? That is a very good question. Thank you very much, Sagurika Cantaria, for putting up that question. To a certain extent, indirectly, it could be addressed by the motivational analysis report. Because in the motivational analysis report, if you remember, I presented the personal assessment results report very quickly. It actually shows us the motivational tendencies of a person towards tasks, towards relationships, and towards influence or towards power. An important aspect of that report, and the second part, shows us a person's self-descriptive index in terms of 12 approaches or behavioral approaches in life in general, whether the leader is at work or outside of work, in a social setting or in a family setting. And this 12 behavioral approaches, to a certain extent, addresses a person's perceptions or tendency to be either, what are some examples there? Introverted or extroverted, or being assertive. So indirectly, it can be addressed. Kelvin, would you like to give your insight on that particular question as well, as I go through the other questions here?
Okay, thank you, Christine. What I've noticed in my coaching sessions by using the Chally tool is that the beliefs and the values are definitely addressed on the coaching sessions itself. Because as you look at the results of the Chally, it gives the person or the coachee an opportunity to really deep dive on his specific gaps. And sometimes when he talks or she talks about their specific gaps, their beliefs, values are brought up. And what I value about it is that through using that tool, it really gives them a specific insight on what values probably or beliefs that they need to work on. Assumptions, definitely, because there are assumptions that some people have before they took the test. And when they receive the test, more assumptions come up. And by having the coaching conversation with that specific coachee, those assumptions are being discussed and being addressed. So there.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you, Kelvin. A few more questions, probably. I'm actually not seeing much. There is a direct message in terms of how can this product be purchased and paid for, and through subscription as well. We will be getting in touch with you separately on that one. I think it depends on how you want to use it, whether on an individual basis or for an intervention. So we can actually discuss that with you. All right. Okay. I think I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone for staying even beyond the 1 hour, and for listening. And I hope that you found these conversations useful. We can actually continue the conversation by getting in touch with you. Should you have any questions, please go ahead and get in touch with us. All right. Thank you very much for joining. Please be safe and enjoy the rest of the day.